It's Monday, the 7th of April, 2025. Welcome to the Fast 5 Business News by Fear and Greed, where we give you the top 5 business stories you need to know in just 5 minutes. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, before we get into the top 5 stories, a very quick, very special announcement. We have a Fear and Greed newsletter, and as of now, right this very moment, it is going daily. It was previously every week, and now it is every weekday at 6 a.m. Head along to fearandgreed.com.au and sign up. It is entirely free, and I'll put a link in today's show notes as well. But Sean, on to the Fast 5. Story number 1, biggest story around today. Global financial markets are in turmoil, with the ASX set to fall sharply this morning. Futures markets are actually suggesting more than 4%. This is on the back, of course, of US tariffs, a retaliatory impost from China, and fears really of a global recession.
Tech stocks on Wall Street are now officially in bear territory after the Nasdaq 100 dropped 6% over the weekend, down more than 20% from its peak. The broader-based S&P 500 was down 6%. Basically, trillions of dollars have been wiped off share markets in the past week or so. The most recent sell-off was in response to Beijing announcing additional 34% tariffs on goods from the US, the same rate imposed by the White House on Chinese goods. Futures trading on the ASX 200 suggests our market will drop 4.3% on opening, worth about $115 billion. That would take it to its lowest level since January last year. It fell 2.5% on Friday, already down 10% from its peak about 6 weeks ago. Investment banks are now forecasting the US will fall into recession. Not good.
Sean, that's equities. What about the Aussie dollar, and what about the outlook for interest rates as well?
Well, it's just above 60 US cents at the moment, but plenty of traders think it will drop below that level. A trade war and US recession could lead to a global recession that'll push commodity prices down. Our currency depends a lot on commodity prices. If there is a silver lining, it's what might happen to interest rates. If our economy slows, the Reserve Bank will cut interest rates. In fact, markets are pricing in 4 rate cuts over the next 12 months. ANZ actually thinks there'll be 3 rate cuts starting in May.
All right, moving on to story number 2 now, Sean, and one from the election campaign. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says a re-elected ALP government will spend $2.3 billion to provide 30% rebates on household battery systems. That's from July this year.
So housing and batteries have become a focal point of the campaign, with the opposition expected to announce a battery program before the 3 May poll. For his part, opposition leader Peter Dutton yesterday was in Tasmania and Melbourne. He said he'd cap international student arrivals, easing the housing crisis. On the battery announcement, about 1 in 3 Australian households have solar, but about 1 in 40 have a battery system, mostly because it's really expensive. The gap means households still require energy from the grid in evening hours when there's no solar, because prices are typically much higher at that point. But if people could put batteries in, they could store it and wouldn't have to dip into the grid.
Story number 3, there might be carnage on global financial markets at the moment, Sean, but it doesn't seem to have filtered through yet to the local housing market. The preliminary clearance rate for auctions over the weekend rose to almost 71%, which is the highest level in 6 weeks.
Pretty good. 2,500 auctions as well. First time above 70% since mid-February. Most cities recorded a rise. Melbourne, at the moment, is doing really well. About 73% it came in at. Sydney, 69%. Adelaide was the best of the mid-size capitals at about 88% in terms of its preliminary clearance rate.
Story number 4, here's a bit of good news, Sean, in the midst of a lot of bad news. The Reserve Bank has a system stability report, and it says that budget pressures have actually eased for households, and the share of households that are behind on mortgage payments has stabilised at pre-pandemic levels.
The bank says cash flow pressures will remain widespread in the short term, but should ease further in coming months. But the central bank's worried that expectations of lower interest rates could cause households to take on too much debt. Already, figures from the Bureau suggest household spending is holding up. Data on Friday shows 5 successive months of higher household spending. In terms of businesses, the Reserve Bank notes that most are still making profits despite slower economic growth and higher costs. The good news is that signs of business financial stress have stabilised. And on insolvencies, the Reserve Bank say they've risen, but remain slightly below the pre-pandemic level trend and pose little threat to stability.
All right, last one, Sean. Story number 5. The world's 500 richest people suffered the biggest 2-day loss ever on the Bloomberg Billionaires Index as fallout from President Donald Trump's tariff announcement just decimated markets across the globe.
Billionaires on the wealth list lost a collective $536 billion US. That's about 900 billion Aussie in just 2 days. 90% of them went backwards. No one lost more over the 2-day stretch than Tesla's Elon Musk. The EV maker's share price fell 10% on Friday alone, cut $31 billion from Musk's wealth. He's lost about $130 billion this year alone. Meta Platforms founder Mark Zuckerberg followed with a $27 billion loss as the social media company dropped almost 14% over those 2 days. Flip side, Nike founder Phil Knight, one of the few winners. The shoe company's stock gained over the weekend after Donald Trump said he'd had a very productive call with the Vietnamese leader about eliminating a 46% tariff. Now, much of Nike's manufacturing is done in Vietnam. Good news for Phil Knight.
All right, there we go. The top 5 business stories in 5 minutes. Thank you very much, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It is Monday, the 7th of April, 2025. Remember to hit follow on the podcast. If 5 minutes isn't enough, you can find our longer daily show called Fear and Greed, wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget, head along to fearandgreed.com.au and sign up for our free daily newsletter. There's a link in today's show notes as well. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was the Fast 5 Business News by Fear and Greed. Have a great day.